The second part of our discussion about the Hunger Games is going to focus on narrative point of view. Again, dealing with the question of space or place within dystopian fiction in this particular novel. A little bit more of an exploration of that. And then a major theme of perception versus reality, which is going to play itself out, especially in the romantic plot that goes on. It's set up in the first half, but it really dominates the second half of the novel. What you get in the novel really is a lot of sort of background and social commentary and the political setup and what is this dystopian world like in the first half, and of course an introduction to all the major characters, and the plot is set in motion. It's a fairly basic plot. It's not overly complex. Remember the audience. But the second half really kind of boils down to two major thrusts. One is, of course, the romantic plot, and then the second thrust is a continuation of an exploration of the survival attributes of the system, right? What's going to happen to these characters? Are they going to make it or not? And then so what starts off as kind of a complex setup, or not a terribly complex setup, but the complexity of setting up really kind of boils down into two major points of interest, or foci, if you will, in the latter half of the novel. So let's talk about the narrative point of view. And you always have to ask this question. I mean, when you write a novel, you always have an opportunity to decide what kind of point of view do I want. We've seen some novels so far that have been in third person, some in first person, and some that have gone back and forth between different narrators in different chapters. And that gives you lots of advantages and disadvantages. Here we got a strictly first person narrator, and she is a 16-year-old. One of the first questions I'd like to ask is to see what you think about whether or not Collins has done a good job of creating the voice of a 16-year-old young woman. That's always in question. Writers sometimes can do a great job of creating a voice that's not from their own particular profile or background. Sometimes they can't do it very well. The question I'm asking is, does it sound like a 16-year-old girl? Does it sound like one? Does it sound too sophisticated, too naive? Sometimes when people are in their 40s or 50s, or however old Collins was when she wrote this, they don't do a very good job of capturing or mimicking teen voices. So, but sometimes they do. So I'll leave that up to you. Maybe that'll be one of our discussion questions. We'll see whether you think that is the case or not. But certainly, I don't think it would be a little easier for her than for me. I've never been a 16-year-old girl. The major reason why one would use a first-person narrator is it allows you to identify with the main character. You get to see the thoughts and the feelings and the responses of that character much more intimately. You don't have to be told about them secondhand. You can find out exactly from that person's mouth or pen what they're feeling at any given time. The other thing is that the first person is limited in its knowledge. So Katniss, at the time, and even in retrospect, only knows so much. She can't know the thoughts or the feelings with any certitude of other characters. That's important here because there's an ambiguity, or at least a question mark, over Peeta's actual feelings for her. And so we get to experience that sense of doubt or limited knowledge, and that adds to the suspense. It also adds to the suspense not knowing what the people in charge of this world are thinking, doing, plotting. We have to experience that along with her, so it gives us a feeling of being in her shoes, if you will. And then the romantic subplot becomes more immediate. When you are hearing from the voice of someone who may or may not be falling in love, who may or may not have divided feelings, who may or may not know how she feels about a person or more than one person, then we're better able to understand and identify with that. And it becomes more immediate to us. It's not as though we fall in love with Peeta, although some of you may have. I didn't. But we can at least hear from someone who's experiencing that and empathize with that person. So the space place issue. This is very interesting here because let's go a little bit deeper on it, because I want you to see the arena as a microcosm of the real world. Microcosm simply means a smaller version of the bigger world, right? In all these respects, that on a small scale it mimics or is an imitation of the real world that they're living in. First of all, the arena is a microcosm of the real world because it, like the real world, is artificially constructed. The arena is an artificial environment. Their whole society is an artificially constructed environment. It's one where messages are controlled, information and access to information is controlled. People are behind the scenes, manipulating events, activities in the arena, even the weather. And these unseen powers control everything. Well, that's true in the arena, but it's also true in all of Panem, right? Because you don't know exactly who's in charge. You don't know the whys. You just know that your life is shaped by and buffeted around by forces and decisions that are beyond your control. So in that sense, life in the arena is a microcosm of the real world because it's artificially constructed, it's manipulated by unseen powers. Also, because every district is represented, it shows the power of the political structure in capital city to control all the districts. It is meant as a show of power over the districts. It's required viewing for everybody all over the country to watch the games. And why would they do that? They do that not just merely as a form of entertainment, but as a form of control. Each person represents the different districts, and that's symbolic of the control that Panem has over the districts. Look at what we can do to you. Now they can't broadcast what they're doing to everybody in a district. There's too many people, but they can select people out of that district or two, right? Select them out of that district and put them through all kinds of things, and that demonstrates that there's not a darn thing they can do about it. It is a visual depiction of the complete helplessness of people in the districts in the face of this unseen, omniscient power out of the Capitol. Okay, and that's by design. It's to reinforce the notion that you don't have control over your life. We have absolute control. Your only choice is to comply, and if you choose not to comply, you're going to die. Okay. The other thing is that just as in the real world, in the arena, of course, the existence is fraught with dangers. Your participation, your life in the arena is like it is elsewhere. It's fraught with dangers. You're hungry. You're oppressed. You go through physical hardship, illness, disease, all kinds of things. So it's as though someone took the real world that these people are living in their various districts, shrunk it down and concentrated it and intensified it. That's what they've done. They've taken the real world of Panem and they've shrunk it down, and they've made a game out of it. Okay, they've made a game out of these people's lives, and for the most part, it provides no way out. Only one winner, and even that person or persons, even that person doesn't really win, right? Even winning the game basically puts you under the thumb of the power structure, because everything you have after the win is totally dependent on them, and you're trotted out as sort of an advertisement, a showpiece for them, and you're nothing more than kind of a mannequin, a real life mannequin. So winning isn't even winning, because you're not winning your freedom. You're not winning anything of substance. You're not winning autonomy. You're simply surviving, and the result is you're kept almost like an animal in a zoo, in a way. If you're lucky, they leave you alone for the most part, and you get to do what you want to do. But the fact that Haymitch lives a life of self-destruction and alcoholism and all these kinds of things shows you that there's no great joy in winning this thing because of what you had to do to win. But also, winning is meaningless in a way. It just you're just alive and you get to self-indulge. That's it. The great system that they've created here is one of an elite class of people living in the Capitol who have lots and lots of indulgences, right? Lots and lots of material comforts at the expense of the great mass of people in the other districts who are essentially slaves. And what is the political structure built on? It's built on controlling the masses and entertaining and preoccupying the shallow elites. Okay? And by elites, I don't mean necessarily they're all rich people, but comparatively speaking, they are, right? So all these people who live in the Capitol, they have a much more food, and they've got the disposable income necessary to maintain a lifestyle that's way better than anything in the other districts, especially District 12. But they're not all wealthy, but they are very privileged, you see. And what do we do to keep those people pacified, to keep them satisfied, to keep them from questioning the regime? We give them what the Romans used to give them. There's an old phrase, 2,000 years old. Roman power was kept in place through bread and circuses. Right? And by circuses, they meant just entertainment, gladiatorial games, all kinds of entertainment, and bread, basically handouts to people, right? So you bribed the people of the Roman Empire with promises of goodies and parties, right? Keep them drunk and keep them fed, and you can keep them under control. So there is the iron fist that controls the other districts, and then there is the bribery of shallow, pointless, meaningless entertainment to a bunch of gullible, spoiled goobs who live in the capital. Okay? So all of this ties in some ways, to this dominant theme in the piece of the difference between perception and reality. It keeps popping back up frequently throughout the novel, and it even ties into the romantic plot, as we'll see. If you look at page 331, as I find it here, what you see is towards the end of the novel, the last couple of chapters, that theme of manipulation and perception and reality, manipulating reality so that you create the perception that you want, comes full force with, for example, the mutations, right? So what is real, what is not real, okay? The mutations, however you want to pronounce it, the mutations and the tracker jackers and the mockingjays, these are all, of course, genetic experimentations. I mean, I think the author's trying to tell us something about the dangers of manipulating nature, right? Okay, kind of the way Shelley did with Frankenstein. Be careful what you play with because it can come back and bite you. That kind of stuff. Creating bioweapons or things of this nature can be a disaster for the human race. Creating these kinds of genetic mutations, however much you want to gain an advantage over nature, always comes back to bite you in the rear end. But you by that point in the novel, you see all these mutations and you begin to say, wait a minute, there's something more going on with that this is all about creating an artificial world, yes, but an artificial world has to be created through artifice, right? Hence artificial. And who's designing it and for what purpose and what could possibly go wrong with it? The genetic mutations that exist in the novel, I think, reflect the moral, watch me carefully here, the moral mutation that the society has already undergone. Okay? So let me say it again. The genetic mutations that you see are really kind of symbolic of or representative of or emblematic of the fact that this is a society that has mutated. Okay? It's mutated. How has it mutated? Through manipulation. Through manipulation of what? Manipulation of the perception out there versus the reality of what's really going on. What people think is going on versus what actually is going on. What people think is happening versus what is really happening. So there's a mutation that has taken place within the society, just like there's been mutations that have been intentional or accidental within nature to create monsters like mutations or to create accidents like mockingjays or tracker jackers or whatever. The society has become mutated as a result of the power structure that has infected it in many ways. Okay. And so now we're faced with monsters that didn't actually exist in nature. We're faced with a political system that wouldn't normally exist in nature were it not for the fact that someone warped and distorted and perverted what should be the ordinary form of governance. I think that's what she's getting at. I think so. There's a reason why she's doing it. It's not just a commentary on, gee, we shouldn't be messing around with Mother Nature. I think she's saying, no, there's something more going on in modern civilization, and there's a threat here. And the threat isn't just that we're going to create animals that, shouldn't be created. We're going to create civilizations that shouldn't be created. And those are going to have an impact on us, just like the animals. The society itself is an animal. Okay, you can go all the way back to to Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes, who basically said in Leviathan, who said that society is an animal, right? It's an organism. If you genetically mutate that organism, you're going to be up a creek. So let's get to where we really see the theme of perception and reality most blatantly. Oh, yes, I had to choose that picture because there she is right in the middle of the two dudes that she has to choose from. And let's take a look at how this romantic subplot unfolds. First of all, there is a tension in the novel, of course, based on whether Peeta and Katniss are being sincere or they're acting for the cameras in the games. Now, it's very clear, and this is where the first person becomes advantageous. It's very clear that Katniss is mostly acting, although she's kind of not entirely sure of her feelings. That's very genuine. That's very believable in many ways. You know, when you're a teenager, you kind of don't know how you feel about somebody. You're like, well, kind of like him, kind of like her, don't know really, sort of thing. That's very believable. But there's also this other element that is, oh gosh, this is why it's so horrible being a teenager. This is why, even though I'm 57, I never want to I would never take the deal of going back in time to be a teenager, because you have to ask constantly, does this person really like me? Or are they just acting like they like me? Am I reading them the wrong way? What if they don't really like me? What if, all that kind of stuff, right? That horrible angst and drama that's part of teenage existence. I guess it's part of our whole life, I suppose, until you find a life partner. But there's always this kind of, does he really like me, or is he just putting on an act? Is he really like me for me, or is he only after something else? Is he really like me, or is he just playing with me, or is he just manipulating me, etc.? See that manipulation theme, right? So again, perception versus reality. So it's early on, it emerges anyway as a strategy in the novel between the two characters to present themselves as being in love, because that gives them that strategic advantage, yada, yada, this, right? But what, as a result, happens is, because we hear it from Katniss's point of view, is she's like, we're acting, right? Are we acting? I think are we? Because I don't really feel this. Well, maybe I do, but I'm not sure. But surely he doesn't feel, well, I don't know, maybe he does, you see. So if she is acting and he is not, then she's going to hurt his feelings, right? She's going to hurt him. If she allows herself to feel this way about him and finds out later he is like an award-winning actor who deserves an Oscar for this kind of performance, then she's going to be hurt, you see? So that's that's just an ancient teenage romantic dilemma. Do I put myself out there? Do I, put my heart out there? Or because it could get stomped on, or I could accidentally stomp on somebody else's. So the unknowing, and we can't feel that and experience that apart from the first person narrative. A third person would never be able to do that for you adequately, right? So there's that issue. And on page 300 and 301, we're sort of introduced to this pretty clearly. She says, Peeta, I say lightly, you said at the interview you'd had a crush on me forever. When did forever start? Oh, let's see. And remember, they're doing this live, and they know there are cameras, right? They know that they're being watched when they do this. So you and I actually don't know whether this is play acting or sincere dialogue, right? Because we're part of the audience as well. So that's another thing, is that we get to see their interaction like the audience would in some respects. Oh, let's see. I guess the first day of school, we were 5. You had on a red plaid dress, and your hair, it was in 2 braids instead of 1. My father pointed you out when we were waiting in line. Your father? Why? He said, see that little girl? I wanted to marry her mother, but she ran off with a coal miner. What? You're making that up. No, true story. And I said, a coal miner? Why did she want a coal miner if she could have had you? And he said, because he sings. Even the birds stop to listen. And then on page 301, I knew, there's a bird outside my window there. I knew, just like your mother, I was a goner. Then for the next 11 years, I tried to work up the nerve to talk to you. Without success, I add. Without success. So in a way, my name being drawn in the reaping was a real piece of luck. And then confusion sweeps over me, because we're supposed to be making up this stuff, playing at being in love, but not actually being in love. But Peeta's story has a ring of truth to it. So at that point in the novel, you're going, oh, does he really feel this way? Right. So that's the fun part about all of this. In some ways, the fun part, I say, you don't know until the very end how he feels. Okay. So then the second thing is this classic case for young females. It is usually the classic case of the choice dilemma. Which dude should I fall in love with? I don't know. They're both cute. They both have wonderful things about them. I thought the movie was cast very well. The two actors who played Peeta and Gale were wonderfully different from one another, and I think were very consistent with what the novel was looking for there. Gale is this big, strong, outdoorsy guy. Peeta's this smaller but more sensitive and caring and feeling kind of guy. So this is a classic dilemma, right? I mean, you're not going to be given the dilemma in a novel like this between two really ugly loser dudes, okay? Because that's no fun to choose between, right? You got to choose between two competing desirable qualities, okay? So that's and the psychological position that the teenage girl is in is, what do I want? What kind of dude do I want? Do I want the big, strong, silent guy who doesn't open up and who's kind of tough exterior, or do I want somebody who's more sensitive and who's more open and emotionally supportive? The truth is you want both, but you can't have both because that's just the life. That's just the way life is. Too bad. And so they put the reader, who's mostly females, young females, in that position of, what do I want? Which one do I want? You see this in all these other different ones, like the Twilight series and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of sort of de rigueur, if you will. But the classic tension, you see it on page 296, for example, where she writes, it's not that Peeta's soft exactly, and he's proved he's not a coward. Okay, so we can't have that, because that wouldn't be a choice at all. It's like, oh, he's soft and he's a coward and he runs away, so I'm not attracted to that. But there are things you don't question too much, I guess, when your home always smells like baking bread, whereas Gale questions everything. So he's not this edgy type. He's not a potential bad boy type. He's not a rough, tough, cynical, hard-bitten kind of guy the way Gale is. But on the other hand, he's not a weenie, right? He's not a weenie. We can't have him be a weenie. What would Peeta think of the irreverent banter that passes between us as we break the law each day? Would it shock him, the things that we say about Panem, Gale's tirades against the Capitol? Gale's a real rebel. Peeta's not really a rebel. Peeta is kind of a guy who is smart and thoughtful, very intellectual, very cerebral, but knows how to work within the system and manipulate it. Knows how to do it, right? Gale is like, screw the system, give me a gun, I'll shoot that guy, And so these are two extremes, right? And so the whole point of the psychological tension that's presented here is present the reader with those extremes and have her agonize over the choice of which kind of dude does she want, right? So on page 311, you see this even more thoroughly highlighted here. This perplexing, good-natured boy, Peeta, who can spin out lies so convincingly the whole of Panem believes him to be hopelessly in love with me, and I'll admit it, there are moments when he makes me believe it myself. Well, now to get to the end of the novel, you know why, because he actually does. But he's really good at presenting it. I mean, don't think that it's either that he's acting or he loves her. He may actually love her, which we find out he does, and he may be acting and being very, very open and public about it for a reason, right? So he's not stupid. He can be both sincere and have a strategy. Don't sell that short. And then she talks about good friends. At least we'll be good friends. Good friends. Anything beyond that, though, and I feel Gale's gray eyes watching Peeta all the way from District 12. She can tell. She's telling you now. Ooh, I got a choice I'm going to have to make, possibly, because I really don't know. She's not been in love before. She's not sure she is in love. She doesn't see herself wanting to be in love. So there's that reluctance there that allows the reader to say, well, she's not like running after these guys. She's not throwing herself at anybody, because the reader doesn't want her to do that. The reader wants her to be this kind of let the dudes come to her, and then I guess I'm going to have to, and then allow those feelings to develop kind of organically, and that's just much more believable to them, right? Because anyway, we don't want to present her as boy crazy. crazy because, that's just not as desirable in the eyes of the reader, not mine. I don't care. It's just not as desirable as having a heroine who's all business and then happens to fall in love because just stuff happens, right? And then she's got a bad choice to make. Oh my gosh, it's a no-win choice because I really would rather, I like both of them, but which one will I choose, etc. Now, what's interesting, and nobody really talks about this much, is that the game makers in the novel are totally complicit in the sham. They may be fooling the audience or trying to fool the audience, or at least Katniss is trying to fool the audience into believing they're in love. Maybe Peeta is in love, you see, at the end. But the game makers aren't fooled. I don't think they're fooled at all. They want the phony storyline, the phony romantic storyline, in order to dupe the gullible, stupid audience out there. And so they know they want a good story, right? They want a good story. These guys are behind the scenes. They're behind the cameras. They're in the control room and they're going, oh, that's good. That's good. Show them this. Show them that. Oh, the audience will love this crap, right? So what does that reveal? It reveals that the powers that be use media, use entertainment to manipulate the public because they think the public's really stupid and shallow and superficial. And it takes something as sincere and intimate as a person's first love. And remember, these are teenagers, right? So this is the first time they're falling in love. It's poor Katniss's first kiss, right? This is supposed to be special and important and sacred. And, when you talk to your daughter or you talk to your son and they're teenagers, you sit down and you say, look, listen, the first time you go out with somebody, the first time you fall in love with somebody, the first time you kiss somebody, it needs to be really special because it's very... I'm not going to say magical, but you don't go around, I don't have a son, but if I had a son, I would say, you don't go around just kissing any girl you want to, okay? Because it means something, right? It's supposed to mean something. I think there are a lot of child actors who will tell you that their first kiss was on camera, which I think steals something from them. It's kind of sad. Everybody should remember their first kiss, and it should mean something. You should actually like that person. You're probably not going to marry that person, but, you walk away and it's like this wonderful feeling that, in Katniss's case, at least ostensibly, is something that is just play acting. Her very first time she ever kissed a boy is like, well, I just have to act like it meant something, and it didn't. Now, later on, maybe it does, right? We'll see. So we see this on page 260 where it's impulsively, I lean forward and kiss him, stopping his words. This is probably overdue anyway, since he's right. We are supposed to be madly in love. It's the first time I've ever kissed a boy, which should make some sort of impression, I guess. But all I can register is how unnaturally hot his lips are from the fever, right? And they do this, and they get a goodie with a parachute. So why this is horribly cynical and manipulative is because, they're getting rewarded by the establishment, by the media establishment, the entertainment establishment that works for the political system to do stuff, even things that should be personal and emotional and intimate, to do stuff that gains viewers' eyeballs and points with the stupid audience that's a bunch of morons. And it's awful the way they use these people. On page 302, you see something further about this whole idea of manipulation. So our lips have barely touched when the clunk outside makes us jump. It's a basket full of food, right? So the more they play act like they're in love, the more they get rewarded. Not because the game makers believe them, but because the game makers are saying, yeah, keep it up, do it. And the audience is saying, oh, give them food. We like that couple. We like them a lot, right? It's as though the audience has made these people into fictional characters. In a fictional plot line, and they actually don't care about them. They just want to live out some sort of stupid romantic fantasy in their own minds through these people who are going to die if they lose. But that's, it's all fine because we just consume people and we don't care. We toss them aside. We don't care about their real feelings. I think that there's a serious amount of social commentary going on here by Collins in that she is saying, look at reality television and look at what media has done and look at what our entertainment industry has done, it basically just uses people. I mean, I don't know if you remember all of this, but remember, you probably were too young, when Britney Spears had her mental breakdown, when Miley Cyrus had her mental breakdown, when Amanda Bynes had her mental break. I mean, these are real people. They're real people. And we brush it off and say, oh, well, they're rich, so, they can get all the therapy they need. My life's tougher than theirs, etc. These are real people who were very, very young, children, when they entered show business, and they just cannot handle this. Their whole world is an artificial construct, and their lives are entertainment for us. Their breakups are entertainment. Their meltdowns, their rehab is entertainment for us. And I think Collins is making some statement here. I truly believe that. And I think she's got a great insight here to say, look at what kind of a society does this? A really messed up society does it. A warped society does this to people for entertainment. We don't really care about them at all. And even let's see, I think my page number is off on that. Yeah, 357, not 352 there. Take a look at Haymitch. Haymitch lets them know that, now I'm skipping around here, I'm sorry. But anyway, we'll move on because in interest of time, the romance for them then simply becomes a tool for survival. It's just something that they have to do to make it through the end of the game. And if they don't, then they won't make it out of that hellhole of a world that they're in. Yes, I guess it was. I guess that's what was it. I mean, until that point, I just tried not to think about what my feelings might be, honestly, because it was so confusing, and it only made things worse if I actually cared about him. But then in the tree, everything changed, I say. Why do you think that was, urges Caesar. This is in the after. Well, maybe because for the first time, there was a chance I could keep him. Right? Is that sincere, or is it just she has to say it? She has to say it. She's got to spin this right, or she's in big trouble even after the games, right? And you know why? Because this is a threat to the political establishment. You do not defy what the powers that be want you to do. And she did it, and he did it too. And so they're going to have to spin this in a way so that the establishment can come off not looking humiliated. Haymitch knows that Peeta is sincere. Haymitch knows that, and he's able to say, look, I knew it all along. You may not realize this, but I do, that he has feelings for you. And if you look on page 357, your only defense can be, you were so madly in love, you weren't responsible for your actions. Got it, sweetheart? Got it. Did you tell Peeta this? Don't have to. He's already there. But you think I'm not? So she misinterprets that. I don't have to tell him. He already knows that he's got to act that way. She thinks that's what he's saying, but he's not saying that. He's saying, I don't have to tell him to act. He's already there. He's already in love with you. So she kind of misreads that. It's a wonderful, wonderful shot at ambiguity there as well. Now, what's great about this, the way we end it here, is we find out that with Peeta, it wasn't an act. He's hurt. He's been, you broke his heart. She's not saying she can't one day fall in love with him. She's just saying, I'm not there yet like you are, and I don't know how I feel yet. This is, I can't just overnight flip a switch and be in love with somebody. And he says, it was all for the games, how you acted. And she says, not all of it, I say, tightly holding on to my flowers. So we have to have a sequel. Ta-da! We have to have a sequel because we got to find out who's she going to choose and how's this going to play out and everything. So really, there isn't a need for a sequel in a second series of games. There really isn't a need for it. At the end of this novel, we only find that out in the subsequent novels. But there is a need to figure out what the romantic subplot is how it's going to develop. This is brilliant on the part of Collins because Collins realizes that the reader, by the time that she finishes the end of the first novel, will be more motivated to read the second novel based on the romantic plot rather than the adventure plot continuing, right? Think about that for a moment. Collins is smart. She knows that the typical reader of this novel is going to be much more inclined to keep reading the second volume based on what's going to happen with the romantic subplot versus Well, let's see him go and do another survival game because that'd be pretty fun, right? The reader is not motivated by sort of a video game world of winning more competitions. The reader is motivated to continue reading because she wants to know how the personal interactions end up. So brilliant stuff in some ways. Are you surprised it's so successful? The lady really does a pretty good job of knowing who her audience is. She does a good job of constructing the plot the way she does, and it's got some serious commentary to it. Now we're going to have a brief, very brief video lecture on film technique, where I'm just going to ask you to kind of consider certain elements of film. And I'm going to post that just as quickly as I can. And then we're going to I need you all to view the film version of this, and then we'll have a discussion of that and probably post something up on that. But in the meantime, sorry that this is delayed by 24 hours. I need you to answer your quiz questions in the traditional way. Go on to Canvas and participate in the discussion in the traditional way by midnight tonight, please. Okay? So question 1, why doesn't Thresh kill Katniss when he has the chance? 2, why is Katniss unable to kill Cato by shooting him? And 3, why are Katniss and Peeta still in danger even after they win the game? By midnight tonight. Today is Tuesday, the 7th. And so I need it by midnight tonight. Okay? Stay tuned. I'll give you an update on other things as well.